Welcome to the workshop on conclusions, effectively ending an essay.
So first off, what is a conclusion? A conclusion is typically the last paragraph in the essay that wraps up usually your main point in your body paragraphs and reminds the reader of the larger implications of your paper.
So what goes into a conclusion? Well, a conclusion is meant to address the so what and who cares questions, telling your reader why your whole paper is really important. Much like an introduction, the conclusion has three main components. You see the structure here is sort of a reverse funnel. So that has three parts. It starts at the most narrow and then gradually gets broader as those three parts move from one to the next. So the first is restating the thesis using different words. It's important to remember to use different words. The second is to remind the reader of the main points of your argument. This is not a full summary, but you are going to hit on some of those main points that you discussed in the paper. And the third section is to leave the reader with something to think about, a call to action, a solution, a prediction, details of the broader implications of the paper, or something else that your reader can sort of reflect on.
So first off, we're going to discuss in a little more detail what it means to restate your thesis. So a reworded thesis is going to typically be a bit broader than your actual thesis. And again, to emphasize, you want to use different words. You're restating it, not repeating it. It reminds your reader of exactly what your main point is and really helps to tie up everything that you've been presenting to your reader. One example would be an original thesis that you start off a paper with might be, houseplants are a wonderful tool for promoting positivity because although they can be messy, their greenery provides a sense of calm. A way to potentially reword it that still gets your point across, but through different words could be, though houseplants lose leaves and can leave dirt or watermarks, they are helpful in encouraging people to be more positive.
So the next component is synthesizing those key components of the paper. So you've restated your thesis using new words. Now we're moving on. So think of this synthesis as sort of a gentle reminder to your reader of the main subtopics you covered. So for example, if you spent a whole paragraph explaining one of the health benefits of having indoor plants, it should be in the conclusion as well. The key thing to remember here is that you are not providing new evidence. You are simply restating the main concepts that you've already talked about. You are not introducing anything new at this point in the paper.
Lastly, you want to leave the reader with something to think about. So as stated before, you're not providing new evidence, but kind of teasing what the implications of your paper can lead to. You want to make sure that the reader knows why they read your paper and what exactly they're supposed to do with that information. And this can take several forms. It can be a call to action. So like in our ongoing example, like getting a new houseplant, a solution such as using towels under the pots to avoid a mess, a prediction, people need houseplants or else their morale can decrease. And or just leaving with a general broader implication of the paper. It should be why your argument matters to the reader, why they should care about it. Basically giving the major so what does this paper mean in the end?
So now that you've done all three of those components, we're putting it all together. So the easiest way to do that is to just put it together. And then once you're done, reread your conclusion and ask yourself some of these key questions. So does it remind the reader of the main point without simply repeating all of the same information? Are there transitions between the sections? That's not something we really talked about, but you want to make sure that you're not just jumping from one thing to the next. Those ideas have to flow without taking any really logical leaps. You want to make sure that you're doing that hard work for the reader. And the third question, does it hit on all three components that we discussed here? Does it start from the most specific with that restatement of your thesis? And does it end in the most general, right? Does it follow that reverse funnel form that we talked about? If the answer to these questions is yes, you're ready to start revising. And one thing that we wanted to point out, remember, writing does not have to be linear. You can come back to the conclusion and rewrite any of the sections at any time as you revise your entire paper. So good luck. So let's take a look at an example of a conclusion. So as you can see, each of these components is each labeled and colored differently, so you can tell how they're all interacting. So the reworded thesis is in blue, The synthesis of the main points is in green, and then the ending part is the something for the reader to think about in yellow. Now, as conclusions work, you can see that this goes from the most narrow into the most broad. That's that reversed funnel format that we were talking about earlier, the one that is opposite the introduction. So let's read through this component together and see how each of these things are working together, how we start with the most narrow and end at the most broad. So the reworded thesis is, though houseplants lose leaves and can leave dirt or watermarks on surfaces, they are helpful in encouraging people to be more positive and in improving overall productivity. Now, I can tell that this is not exactly the thesis. The thesis is probably a little bit more concise, maybe worded a little bit differently, but it is reworded. It's reminding the reader what that thesis is without exactly repeating it. Now, the next section says, they not only clean the airspace around them, but they provide a sense of calmness and joy when scattered around the home. People need plants to feel like they belong in a space and to feel secure in that space. Because houseplants are proven to be beneficial for physical and emotional health, more people should consider getting plants in their homes and offices. So I can tell that this is sort of a synthesis of my main points. I am not summarizing them. I am not repeating them. I am just kind of hinting at what those main points were without repeating them. And that is key. Just as we said earlier, there's no point in repeating what you've already said in your paper. Your readers already read it. They're at the end. You can just kind of hint at what was said and then you move along. And that brings us to our final section, the something for the reader to think about. So this is the last sentence in the conclusion, and typically this sentence holds a lot of weight. It's often referred to as the drop the mic sentence, the drop the mic moment, because this is the last impression that your reader is going to have of your paper. So that's why it's so important to leave the reader with something to think about, or some kind of call to action, or some kind of consequence if they don't do something. So this writer chose to say, without plants, these spaces remain dull and they lack mood boosting benefits that plants bring into a space. So as you can see here, this writer chose to sort of do a consequence. So without plants, this is what the space will look like. So as you can tell, this whole conclusion functions starting with the most narrow and ending with the most broad. Feel free to pause and reread this at any point and try it out for yourself. Good luck.